George Floyd's death sparking protests across the country. Denver went into lockdown yesterday after someone there fired a gun near a peaceful protest. Protesters in Columbus, Ohio, charged the state capitol. And more demonstrations are expected there today. And protesters are also rallying in New York for a second day. NBC News correspondent Ron Allen is there. And Ron, what's happening where you are in the city?
Well, Allison, there's a crowd of several dozen protesters that are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They're supposed to start at 4 o'clock, but it's starting early. And they've moved down here, and they are converging on the New York Criminal Court building and the district attorney's office here. You can see there's a big NYPD police presence on bikes all around this area. There are literally hundreds of police officers trying to make sure things stay under control. A little bit further down the street here, you can see it looks like there are a couple of people who are here. Yesterday, there were 70 people arrested. There were confrontations. There were a couple of police officers who were injured and had concussions. So the police were ready for this. And this all started happening in the last half hour or so, but you can see things are getting a little bit chaotic. The police, of course, are well prepared for these kinds of things. The protesters are here in support of protesters out in Minneapolis. They're also, this is a We Can't Breathe protest, which of course echoes Eric Gardner. The Garner case happened 6 years ago, next month, July 2014. To this day, no officer has been charged with a crime in that case. And these protesters are very aware of that. You can see here they're bringing out some guy who's causing some problems. Unsure what exactly he was doing down here, but clearly the police are not playing with this. They don't want any trouble back here. So just watching the situation. It's a very narrow street, and again, it's
New York City Police Department. You are unlawfully in the road traffic.
So this is also, the police are concerned about not just crowd control during an incident here, during a protest, but of course there's social distancing. We're in the middle of a pandemic as well, and that's not happening either. So the police are saying that they are going to start arresting people who are disorderly conduct if need be. And you can see there's a lot of energy down here. There's a lot of passion. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of resentment. And now you can see the police are really being adamant about clearing the street down here.
Yeah, Ron, you can feel it, you can hear it, you can see it there for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Make sure that you're in a safe place.
This looks like a man he doesn't look like one of the protesters. They were much younger people, and this is an extreme situation here where they just carry this guy out. He looks to be in some distress. Now the police are picking him up by all and just carrying him out. Okay, let's get him, understand where we are here. Let's.
Get out of the street.
All right, the cops are insisting that we get out of the street and on the sidewalk, trying to bring order here. Let's see if we can see what's going on down there a little bit. Because this is where
we'll stick with you, Ron, just as long as you're in a safe place.
Yeah, we're in a safe place. This seems to be the heart of the protest. The police are drawing a firm line here where they are blocking the protesters. The protesters are now moving. They're moving further on, and that seems to be what the police want, is for them to keep moving and to go further on. We'll stay with it, see what happens out here. But another crazy situation all of a sudden. Allison?
Ron, unbelievable. Before I let you go, if you're able to stick with us, one thing you said that struck me, Eric Garner 6 years ago, it's hard to believe it has been that long. What else are folks there telling you as you speak with protesters there today?
Well, there was some relief. Obviously, when one of the officers out in Minneapolis was charged, because here it's been 6 years and there have been no charges. There was a state grand jury that looked at the Garner case, The federal prosecutors looked at this for 5 years, 2 administrations, the Obama administration, eventually the Trump administration, and it was just July of last year that the Attorney General decided that there would be no civil rights federal charges filed against the officer. The officer, Daniel Pantaleo, was fired as a result of a NYPD internal disciplinary hearing, but there has not to this day been anyone held criminally responsible in the Eric Garner death. And so when things started happening out in Minnesota, it looked like that. It looked like that. Everyone was dreading that this case out there, the Floyd case, could go on. Here's another arrest. They're taking out another individual.
Yeah.
The police are not. The police are not playing. The police do not want this to get out of control, and they are serious today. You can see over there across the street, there's a strong presence guarding the entrance to the courthouse, and that's the entrance to the district attorney's office as well. And now the police and the protesters are moving on down into Chinatown. More dense streets. More dense streets, more people. We'll have to see where this goes.
Ron, we have seen protests in New York City before, Union Square in particular, downtown, no stranger to people expressing how they feel, demands for justice, you name it. I mean, we talked about Eric Garner, but there have been cases before. How does what you're seeing today compare to protests you've covered in the past?
You know, Allison, I hate to say it, but it has this feeling of deja vu all over again. That, the first big protest I can remember covering was out in Los Angeles after the Rodney King trial in the early 90s.
Yeah.
That's, 30 years ago? And that was, there's videotape there, too. And everyone thought those officers would be convicted because of the videotape, but they weren't. And that caused the LA uprising, as it's called. Here's another person getting arrested there. They've got the person's hands in restraints. It seems that it looks like the main crowd of the protesters have gone further up the street there. They're way down there. They're about 3 or 4 blocks ahead of us. And, but the police are blocking this area of the city off right here now as well. It's really chaotic down here. This was supposed to be a protest in Foley Square. It was an area that was surrounded, cordoned off. There's another. That's at least the 3rd or 4th person we've seen taken away. Here's another woman, young woman over here.
Right up over here.
And we can hear an announcement from the police telling people to not block the streets. And there's yet another arrest going on over there by that car. You can see it. Watch the car over there, guys. Why don't we keep on going down? We're going to keep on going down and see what else we can see down here. And you hear the chant there now. It's hands up.
I was going to ask you, what are they chanting?
Anthem from Ferguson. Hands up, don't shoot, which was the anthem rallying cry in Ferguson after the death of Michael Brown. Another case where a grand jury did not bring charges. The officer never faced charges. The federal government chose not to prosecute as well. these civil rights cases have a very high burden of proof threshold to convict an officer. Officers are given the benefit of the doubt because they are licensed and they are expected to use force. So to convict an officer of excessive force, deadly force, it's a tough burden. And just looking at some statistics recently, it's very rare still, many years later, that officers are ever convicted in these kinds of cases. Let's see. Let's get on this. We're going to get on the sidewalk out of here as they're telling us to do. Trying to do this as well is keep my distance from everybody as well.
Yeah, Ron, I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, this is happening in the middle of a pandemic. How is social distancing playing into the protest today? Is it at all?
Believe me, Allison, it is forefront in my mind and our crew's mind. We are trying to keep our distance and trying to do this as safely as possible. This is the last thing I expected to happen down here today. But you can see many of the folks in the crowd wearing masks. They're not 6 feet apart. There's a lot of passion. There's a lot of yelling and screaming. We really want to just stay away from this and show you what's happening, but not get too close. It's just, but the police, you can see, have things under control. The police have really, they were out here, they knew this was coming. This had been advertised as, this was advertised as a march that was going to start at 4 o'clock. So the police are out here in force. I can see even more police reinforcements in that direction coming this way. And here we seem to have reached a point of standoff where the officers and that group are face to face, and we seem to have hit a point now where here things are sort of calming, if I could use that word in this crazy context.
Yeah. Ron, we would stick with you even longer, but you are in demand today, so I have to let you go to some of our other colleagues at NBC and MSNBC. But thank you so much for your coverage today, whether you are in the heart of the coronavirus epidemic or at the protests here. Thank you so much for bringing us to the biggest stories in New York these days. Appreciate it.
Sure thing.
Protesters in George Floyd's hometown of Houston are now taking to the streets. Members of Black Lives Matter Houston rallying at Houston City Hall. NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson joining me now from Houston. Priscilla, we can hear the crowds chanting. Tell us what's happening there now.
Yeah. Allison, well, easily a few thousand people have turned out today to protest and rally in honor of George Floyd. As you mentioned, he is from Houston. He grew up and went to high school just a few miles from here. And so you've got all these people out here, a lot of signs. There's one in particular that actually talks about the fact that this pandemic isn't the only thing that's killing Black people. Racism is also a huge problem right now. Folks calling for the police to be prosecuted. We heard a chant earlier this afternoon that said, an arrest is not enough. They want to see convictions happen here. And, it seems to, of the people that I've spoken to, it seems like a very personal issue for them. Some people said that it felt like when that officer had his knee on George Floyd's neck, it was as though he had his knee on their necks. And just also hearing from people that this is the community where George Floyd grew up, and they really feel like, he's given so much to the fabric of this community, and it was important for them to come out today and protest that. We've got some speeches going on over in this area, and so you hear some of the chanting and things like that rising up from there, but most of the folks who are back here can't even necessarily hear that. So they're really operating on their own accord with their chants and their signs. And I will say that they've handed out masks at the beginning of this protest. Most of the folks here are in masks, so also aware that there is a pandemic going on, but that wasn't going to stop them from coming out today to rally about this. Allison.
Yeah, Priscilla, I was going to ask you a little more about the nature of those protests today. If you got the sense that people were socially distant, if you felt like they were peaceful in nature, if you could describe a little more just sort of what the energy is like there today.
Yeah, I mean, I think early on, this rally actually got started about a half hour early because people were getting so impassioned and delivering these passionate speeches. And so folks decided to start marching early from the park down here to City Hall. We haven't seen a lot of distancing. There's obviously not a lot of space for that when you've got thousands of people out, but folks are wearing those masks, as you can see. And, you know, the crowd has thinned out a little bit and folks have been able to create some space. But I mean, folks are really passionate about it, and the news came down just a little bit before this that the officer had been arrested, and folks were happy to hear that, but they still want to know what's going to happen with the other officers that were present at the time of this incident. And also, an arrest does not mean a conviction, and they're very clear about that and demanding that this continues through the justice system.
Priscilla, have you seen any protester-police interaction at all today, and what has that been like?
Yeah, so we haven't seen any of that. These protests have been fairly peaceful. There have been a couple of instances where we've seen folks running, and we're not exactly sure what happened there, but this protest has been peaceful. I will say that we also saw folks carrying around milk, which is often used in the case of if there's tear gas or something like that to sort of help people clean out their eyes. And so we did spot a couple of gallons of milk, but so far I haven't seen that being used at all. And this protest is very peaceful.
Priscilla, I know that Houston's mayor also spoke about George Floyd's death. What did he say?
Yeah, so the mayor did come out along with a Texas state senator to really condemn the actions of those police officers and to call for justice in this case. Chief Aceveda, the police chief here in Houston, also spoke about that and condemned the nature of this incident. But it's interesting because the people that I've spoken to here have said that the point of this rally is to hold those elected officials accountable. It's not enough to just have them talk about and condemn these actions, but they do actually want to see some sort of actions in progress. I actually spoke with the organizer who told me that there have been a number of police-involved shootings here in Houston that they feel like they're still awaiting justice for. And so this is a reminder that this is about more than just George Floyd. And as you can see, we've got more protesters who are coming through. They want to get back out on the streets and rally. And so that's where things are here right now.
Priscilla Thompson at Houston City Hall, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe.